Good morning, everybody. I want to do this live. It's important. It's Canada's sickness that is now spreading in the United States. Americans are realizing what Canada is and what Canada is doing. An iconic corporation, Ben and Jerry's ice cream, monstrous in size, folks, massive in the United States, growing to a large scale in Canada. You'll find them in places like Vancouver and absolutely Toronto, Ontario. And folks, they tweet out one location in Toronto that says Canada Day is Canada Stolen Land Day. And they say land back. Canadians, everybody's on a boycott mission now in the news, is no friend of this iconic American company, and they slam them. They propagate a story of trying to make this company look self-righteous. They're on stolen land. I've heard this myself. Whenever anyone speaks out on the truth, they're suppressed and the negativity comes flying at the person. Folks, Ben and Jerry's knows very well what's happened with the American Indian. And again, I'm going to say it, why this is so important to share, why I tag Ben and Jerry's, who's now been boycotted to massive extremes in Canada by institutionalized Canadians. Us. And we're our own product of a diseased institution. I'm going to say it again. When we talk about land back, what are we talking about? We're talking about over 90% of Canada that does not sit as private property of the Canadian people. Worse, much, much worse than that, 99.8% of Canada does not reside in the hands of any First Peoples, none whatsoever. Think about that. 99.8% of Canada. Canadians, you were on 9% of Canada. And of that 9%, yes, it's divided into First Peoples. More than that, a pile of that is public land. A pile of that is government parks. A pile of that is held by wealthy, first-class, elite Canadians who lease it out to all of you. When we compare countries all over the world, and Ben & Jerry's understands this better than anybody, they're American. 94.5% of America is made available to all Americans and all First Peoples. The American Indian, who is the exact same peoples as the Canadian First Peoples, they're one and the same, got a very much different settlement than the Canadian First Peoples. American Indians enjoy 155% more land than all Canadians and all First Peoples combined. 9% of America is a part of the American Indians' holdings as sovereign people with their own constitutions. They have self-government, self-determination, a settlement of the claims. They themselves get 155% more than 9% of America. Think about that. Think about that. It's almost 15% of the United States of America is theirs, not anybody else's. It's theirs as their private property. A whopping massive amount per person per capita compared to Canadian and First Peoples. Think about that. Think about that. They're enjoying 15% of their country as their property their ability to generate revenue, their own constitutions. They're a separate peoples, a nation within a nation. There are better, in fact, all 155 registered constitutional entities are in fact in a better position than a province or a territory in Canada when it comes to governance and representation. That is not the story of Canada. It's not even the story for Canadians or First Peoples. Neither or. Either or don't get anything substantial. They crush and crush more people, subdividing that 9%. First Peoples grow, their reserves never expand. It becomes ever costly. And yes, taxpayers fund through the Indian Act a whole government triangle of corruption, just like the Canadian system. Do the people on the reserves really see any major contribution of the monies Canadians put in through the Indian Act in the system? The answer is no. They get a small fraction because the pigs at the trough, all government elected or appointed, and a vast amount are appointed. And they all take the money, and lawyers and everybody else. And by the time it reaches the people on the reserve, there's hardly anything less. It's much less per person per capita than what Canadians get on welfare. Think about that. Think about all the Northern Arctic peoples and just how bad they're living and how bad they're doing. Never mind, they were transplanted in Canada from their original origins to the far reaches of the Arctic so that Canada could put its claim in the ground, and who cares if those savage Indians die. Now, the RCMP has a private army as well as a commissioned army to fight Indian wars in what is called Cascadia, British Columbia, where 90% of the province is unceded. I don't think Canadians really understand what unceded means, and there's a number of unceded territories in Canada. Ontario holds the other. That means that the government of Canada has not established any treaties and is in fact engaged in a war against the First Peoples of those areas. And of course, Cascadia, British Columbia is a massive area, 90% of the province, not under any treaties, and is in fact acquisitioning land and transporting resources through an Indian war. The RCMP are the military police of the country. They are many styles of police, but they are also military police, and CERG is one of those corporations underneath the RCMP in military service to the government at absolutely an Indian war with the First Peoples inside British Columbia. This has been the truth of Canada for a long time. Why do Americans lash out? Why would a big company in the United States lash out on Independence Day after they saw the same video I saw in the Senate and how they're trying to minimize what First Peoples are going through? Well, folks, in America, the last Indian war ever fought was 1921. They've all ended. America is further along on truth and reconciliation by an astronomical marker than Canada. Canada hasn't moved an inch since 1867, whereas USA continues over and over to move the line. In fact, American Indians making their own money in their own governmental systems also have laws to buy back lands. And they are not by American taxpayer subsidies, by their ability to generate revenue on their nearly 15% of America made available to them. You can look at all kinds of states. Now, yes, the state's boundaries are there, but when you look inside the American state, you find some states, especially out west, underneath British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, right underneath them, and all the way down to nearly South America, massive settlements and land back were provided. As much as some states, 40% of their state is a reserve, an Indian reserve of its own governance with its own federal ministry, or multiple reserves on Indian territory as its own separate style state with its own federal representation, its own ministry. America does very well. Do you ever hear any news about this, Canadians? No. And why? Because 94% of America is made available to Americans and American Indians. Everybody's doing extremely well. Coming out of the 70s, massive UN laws ratified, bound in international law were also adopted by the United States of America. What did Canada do with those laws? Sweet diddly do. They in fact went, here's the middle finger. Like South Africa, we're going to do it our way. And these people will break. We will break them with our military agenda through genocide. That's right. Right now, do you know who was shut down on a forced genocide and a cultural approach onto historical territories? The Conservatives. They were shut down hard in British Columbia, Cascadia. The Wet'suwet'en and 20 other First Nations groups celebrated the fact that they had a small win from Justin Trudeau and apparently Jagmeet Singh. Well, that didn't happen, folks. Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau said, now we can construct on the same lines, through the same system, through the same military police, killing, missing and murdered Indigenous women, and on, through private military contractors. CERG is the military police division of the RCMP to destroy Cascadian Indians. That's the truth. Unceded Indians, wherever they are a problem for the government. It's been going on for over 150 years, folks. They also have a private security contractor, global, through the UK, and Canada highly pays that organization to destroy First Peoples as well too. I think if we really investigated missing and murdered Indigenous women, you'll find those two groups at the highest level of involvement and responsibility for such things all over Canada. When you find that private military contractor, what are we talking about? A contractor with even more specialty than the Wagner Group and USA's Black Ops Group's private army. Much larger, much more financed, much more global. And Canada's been utilizing this forever. Now, I've been preaching this stuff for a long time. A Vermont major company finally stood up and said, no, this is wrong. It's time to speak out on what the Canadian government's doing. Is it just land back for First Peoples what Vermont's talking about? No, they're talking about the Crown lands, Canadians. So many Canadians don't understand. And now we're moving, and the media's moving, the government's championing, boycott that American company. How dare they speak about human rights? They're on this stolen land too. I beg to differ. I think that the Canadian government needs to tell people the truth of what land back would be and the truth of the massive portions, the 91 nearly percent of Canada that is unavailable to all First Peoples and all Canadians. That land sits in the hands of the federal and provincial crown, nobody else, and all kinds of foreign powers, elites. You've heard a lot of these billionaire names, but you haven't even heard the bulk of it. A lot of you complain maybe about five of these global billionaires. In fact, there's 1,500 global billionaires involved in what's transpiring in Canada throughout the Commonwealth, many from the UK themselves. They exploit the resources of Canada at unheard of global rates. I've talked about diamonds, gold. We can go through oil and gas, of course, and go on many things. Oil and gas, comparatively to everything else that's stolen out of Canada for pennies on the dollar to make wealthy elites extremely rich, is actually one of the better. When you look at oil and gas, they pay the most because I think they have the biggest spotlight shined on them. But you won't hear about all the rare earth metals. You won't hear about all the rare earth minerals. You won't hear about the forestation and on and on and on through potash, through uranium. We can get into all of it, the elements taken out of Canada by the tonnage, unprecedented tonnage. This used to be South Africa. The South Africa apartheid regimes of old, they did all of this. They exploited South Africa. And again, who was the major beneficiary? It was the UK and these global giants, 1,500 strong. Are American companies in here? No, not really. Hardly any at all. Are there some Americans? Sure. But when you look at America as the leading economy in the world, China leading economy in the world, UK shouldn't be there in such abundance, right? So it's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. The Commonwealth is a disease, and Canadians need to know this. I'm going to go look today. I go pick up my daughters and enjoy some time again with my daughters for the week. I'm going to look for a Ben & Jerry's. I don't know if they operate in Alberta, but when I take my girls for ice cream, we usually go to the ice cream parlor. A big deal for us. It's a family tradition, but I'm going to look for Ben & Jerry's, wherever that is in and around Edmonton. If it's there, I'm going to go there, and I recommend all of you do too, because that was the courageous, most self-sacrificing thing any major company's ever done in Canada. And it's an American company rising up to say, no, this is wrong. This country is wrong. And they're not the only ones. There's been many companies who got sick of the government of Canada, the province of BC, and even the province of Ontario in their war on the Indians. And where does that word come from when I say it? The actual legal definition of First Peoples in Canada. All First Peoples. I'm going to say it again. Anyone who reads the ICC and not the court, we're talking about the Intercircumferential Polar Council, the Arctic for all Inuit. They can't even exist as they were transplanted throughout the north by the evil federal government. They can't even exist outside of the Indian Act. The government assigned the Indian Act to the ICC, which is different than Russia and the United States. They never did anything like that. They have never even heard of that. They're shocked to know about it as companies are learning, especially American companies, they're shocked to learn of this truth. And more, as Global's now learned, as Facebook Meta's now learned, Canada is a lie, a constant human rights violator of mass proportion, and they run the country worse than Russia does. Think about that. You've heard all the stories about Russian corruption. You've heard the stories about Ukrainian corruption. Well, Canada's corruption is at an equivalent magnitude under its constitutional monarchy. You never hear about it because it's suppressed. Numbers are smudged. It's for hire first-class sworn citizens to tell you what you have to learn, not what you should learn. You have to learn to keep the institutionalization alive. Canadians, look at your country. There is no other country on this earth comparable to what your government is withholding from all of you, all Canadians and all First Peoples, except for Australia and New Zealand. Now you can compare them. I don't even think they register as bad as Canada because we were the first design. Look at South Africa and all its history. If you ever want to learn about this evil, it was called South Africa, which too again was designed off Canada. We are Canada 1867. We are Canada with currently in 2023, the Indian Act of 1876. Never repealed, never changed, never destroyed. It remains there forever and a day. If you ever want to know about gross human rights violations, go read the current living Indian Act. No federalism for any Indians. They're savage people who must be put under the federal system on a welfare on the smallest amount of land available that nobody could ever hope to ever sustain themselves, sometimes in the worst places Canada could come up with. And if they did do well, they were quickly moved and picked up. Did you know that according to the Indian Act and the laws of Canada, and it's happened, any Indian nation can be disbanded, picked up and moved to another remote location anytime any government deems necessary. That's federally and provincially. And it's happened hundreds of times in Canada's history, all the way back since 1876, all the way through till now. It still happens. And we pretend that we're holier than thou, that how dare an American company point the finger at us, because they've grown by leaps and bounds. They're more than 102 years ahead of us in the file of First Peoples human rights. 102 years ahead of Canada. Nobody can even remotely compare Canada and USA is anywhere near the same when it comes to the file of the American Indian versus the Canadian First Peoples in all their entirety. Inuit, they don't exist without the Indian Act. Métis, they don't exist without the Indian Act. Besides Alberta, there are no other settlements. How did Alberta get those settlements for the Métis? By screwing over all the treaty Indians after they signed the treaties. Did you hear me? After they signed the treaties, effed them over. There's no historical happy face or stamp of justice for Alberta. But in that respect, is it better than the rest of Canada? 100%. The rest of Canada doesn't recognize Métis, has never ever given the Métis any sort of real status and any reserves or anything else. It's what those people have put together themselves. And then by far the worst treated is all the numbered treaty Indians and absolutely all unceded Indians who still fight for their lives today in British Columbia and Ontario. And it hasn't ended and nobody wants to end it. Canadians are complacent, just like South Africans were. And I'm going to say this 18 plus portion right now. In just modern history, not too long ago, folks, we're talking the 70s into the 80s, it was deemed normal to take an African child, a little boy who drank out of a white fountain, string him up on a lamppost, and slice open his testicular bag so his testicles would fall out and he would bleed out as a warning to other black children. This was deemed normal by the entire population majority. People said, well, that's what you get. That's how institutionalized South Africans were in a minority, in a majority of natural Africans, real indigenous Africans, black face and all the shades of it, the real ones. And I don't know how else to say it the nice way, because it isn't nice. That's the sad part. It isn't nice. And they use these excuses to paint people like myself as racist by telling these truths. Just like Ben and Jerry's now is painted some kind of evil corporation inside of Canada, whom all they did on Independence Day in their patriotism stand up and say, no, we won't operate like this in Canada, and we won't stand for it. Our country has done so much in human rights. We've rewritten historical wrongs through real truth and reconciliation, and Canada continues forward in pure, unfiltered, unfettered evil, just as South Africa did. Why are all the worst countries of human rights violating? The worst countries in property rights? Why are they all constitutional monarchies? That's easy. This is the idea of someone born on this earth as a divine human being to rule over you as a subject who's a slave, and to liquidate every original person deemed a savage. They target a group of people specifically by race, culture, ethnicity, religion, and say they have to be deemed a savage. To get the slaves to cooperate, they have to have somebody who's less than them, somebody that the slaves can look at and say, they're worse than me, they get what they deserve, and then you get complacency of slaves. This is not the American way. Does the United States have huge historical wrongs? Sure. They also had 5 of the world's colonials destroy that region of people before they became the United States of America, and they warred all 5 of them. And once they finished the war on all 5, there were historical settlements for the American Indians, giving them self-government, self-determination, and absolute sovereignty. It is not existent in Canada. You have a widespread systemic genocide, longer running than Nazi Germany. Why? Because we were the first build. Nazi Germany came after our example. Read the 1933 Enabling Act. Read the Indian Act 1876 Canada. Then you'll find out Hitler got those ideas from Canada. Where did the apartheid ideas come from in South Africa? Oh yeah, they came after Canada too. I can go on and on all day long through vast amounts of the world. It's all on my residential school genocide videos logged on my Facebook. You will find the truth of so many countries. I didn't even do all of them. I could have done 100 videos. Never even got to that mark. Didn't have to. The results were clear, sick, disturbing, and very real. And again, you can compare each and every one to Canada. And so many fall after Canada under the design of Canada. Canada won, the first one, the apparent most successful one, a new way to operate the crown, a sick, perverted way to operate the crown. It's up to you to share. It's up to you to get it out there. It's up to you to stand up. We are a vast minority in an ocean sea of seemingly institutionalized Canadians. It's up to you to tell the truth. Canada would be a much better place. Canadians wouldn't have the inflation they have today. They wouldn't have the radical, out of control housing costs. They would have their own unto them, as would the First Peoples. If you don't believe me, go compare housing prices in the United States to Canada, and then don't go to downtown New York, Manhattan, and take the average of the USA versus the average of Canada. Look at all of it. Look at the American Indian versus the Canadian First Peoples and all of their narratives. You will find vast disparities. You'll find absolute impoverished reserves in Canada. So many with absolutely nothing. You won't find anything like that in America. Not even close. That's my video. Share, share, share. Get it out there. Back Ben and Jerry's up. Back them up. I know.